herb. Herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Herb.
Hello, Eugene. Welcome to the Eugene Cannabis TV. We've got some news stories to talk about all over the nation, some few are all over the world. So we've got some cannabis news and hemp information that we hope you can use. The first thing I wanted to talk about was an article that a friend of mine gave me out of the April 18th edition of the USA Today. States consider tying jobless benefits to drug tests. This is pretty relevant in the state of Oregon because Oregon is one of the states that's trying to do this. It says South Carolina State Senator Harvey Peeler was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting in January when the Human Resources Director of one of the area's major employers, textile manufacturer Hamrick Mills, told him the company was having trouble hiring some people from the unemployment rolls. They said they had potential employees that would come and apply and couldn't pass the drug test. Peel, a Republican who says he heard similar stories from other employers, introduced a bill February 9th that would suspend unemployment checks to people who fail a drug test they must take to get a job. South Carolina, there it is among 27 states, including Florida, Massachusetts, and Arizona, to consider legislation this year that would require recipients of various kinds of public assistance to pass drug tests, according to Megan Dorsch of the National Conference of State Legislatures. So in Oregon is one of them, 27 states, and Oregon has one too. So the ACLU is saying that it's unconstitutional and thinks that it'll be struck down. But of course, the way these things go, they'll pass the law and then somebody will challenge it and maybe get it struck down. But in the meantime, it costs a whole bunch of people a lot of money and a lot of freedom. But unfortunately, that's the American way. So. Yeah, it's always interests me, disgusts me at the same time that the government seems to be interested in our urine. And yet, the people that make the laws don't have to submit to them. So I keep saying that's another example of the police state. It's coming and it's here, and people call me radical, but all the clues are in front of you. Here's a little deviation, though, that is heartening. Montana governor vetoes the medical marijuana repeal. Montana's Republican legislature wanted to repeal the state's voter-approved medical marijuana law, but the Democratic governor struck it down with the veto pen. Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer Wednesday vetoed a bill that would have repealed the state's voter-approved medical marijuana law, a bill that would tightly regulate the state's medical marijuana industry and dramatically reduce the number of eligible patients remains alive. Governor Schweitzer heeds the will of the voters, not the legislature, riding a public backlash against perceived excesses by some players in the state's medical marijuana industry. Both houses of the state legislature voted to approve a repeal bill, sponsored by House Republican Mike Milburn, a Republican. Surprise, that would completely undo the 2004 ballot initiative that legalized medical marijuana in the state. So it says, I issue this veto of HB 161 because I do not believe it is right that 91 legislatures overturn the will of the people of Montana who passed this citizen initiative in 2004 by a significant margin, Schweitzer said in a video statement. So, hats off to Governor Brian Schweitzer in Montana. It's one of the few bright signs in this war against ignorance. And then we jump to Jamaica. Interesting things happening in Jamaica. Jamaica is to look again at decriminalizing marijuana. A decade ago, the Jamaican government quietly shelved a National Ganja Commission report calling for decriminalization. This week, it decided to take it up again. 10 years ago, Jamaica's government-appointed National Commission on Ganja produced a report calling for marijuana decriminalization, which the Jamaican government, under pressure from the United States, promptly forgot about. But now, the government of Prime Minister Bruce Golding has announced that it will again review those recommendations. The Jamaican government just might give these Rasta man something else to smile about. According to the Associated Press, the decision was announced Monday in Kingston. 6 cabinet members will review the 2001 report. That report, which was authored by academics and physicians, found that pot smoking was, quote, culturally entrenched, unquote, in the island nation, and that most moderate users suffer no ill effects. While it called for decriminalization, ominous rumblings from the U.S. Embassy in Kingston at the time ensured that the notion died a quiet death. Ganja has broad, although not complete, public acceptance in Jamaica, where it is considered a sacrament by adherents to Rastafarism. But its possession or cultivation is illegal under Jamaican law. The Reverend Webster Edwards, who was a commission member, told the Associated Press Tuesday he was relieved that the report would be reviewed by cabinet members and that he hoped the review would eventually lead to loosening the marijuana laws. That would require the legislative action. So if I see more about that, I'll sure bring it up on our news show and talking about it here. So a little glimmer of hope and some sanity coming there. And then we got this from Ethan Nadelman, who's the executive director of Drug Policy Alliance, one of the big names in the anti-prohibition movement. He's saying that it's time to ask for your $169 back. That's how much every man, woman, and child in America contributes every year to perpetuate the $51 billion war on drugs. What do we get in exchange? An overwhelmed legal system, a skyrocketing prison population, and millions of responsible people like you and me caught in the crossfire. With politicians scrambling for budget cuts, we have a unique opportunity to make real headway in dismantling the draconian and expensive drug war. But we can't do it without you. Please donate now to help us make the most of this opportunity. So in the past years, we've heard of a lot of talk from policymakers about being smart on crime and moving toward a health-based approach to drug use. Drug czar Gil Kurlotsky is even claiming that he's already ended the war on drugs. Yet as many lives are being destroyed as ever. If the current rate holds, more than 760,000 people will be arrested in 2011 for just possessing a small amount of marijuana, twice the number of marijuana possession arrests as in the 1980s. So anyway, it's the war goes on, and the drug war. It's a war against our own people. But slowly, I think people are waking up and turning around. Big news out of Canada. Ontario court overturns Canadians' marijuana law. A court in Ontario has struck down Canada's marijuana law, saying it prevented patients from gaining access to their medicine. Now the government has 90 days to respond before pot is legal in Ontario. An Ontario Superior Court judge Tuesday threw out the sections of Canada's Controlled Drugs and Substances Act that bar marijuana possession and cultivation. The ruling came in a case in which a medical marijuana patient argued that the Health Canadian marijuana medical access regulations were so burdensome that it effectively barred patients from gaining legal access to marijuana. Matt Murha is a medical marijuana patient and activist who used the herb to relieve the symptoms of scoliosis, seizures, and fibromyalgia. He said he was able to find a doctor willing to sign the paperwork and allow him to become a doctor under the program, and was raided and arrested for growing his own plants without a license. In the ruling, Justice Donald Talino gave the government 90 days to come up with a solution in line with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The government could appeal the decision. If the government does not act within 90 days, marijuana will be legal across the province of Ontario, and the Ontario precedent could be considered by courts in other provinces. So that's an interesting move up there, and it's we'll have to wait and see where that ends up. So hopefully it'll go well and maybe influence us here south of the border. Here's an article written by Alan St. Pierre, who is the chairman of the NORML organization. He's saying, excuse me, this is titled "See No Weed." He says, feds in Colorado explain why they're not turning up heat on dispensaries. He says, despite federal efforts in other states to crack down on dispensaries, feds in Colorado say they haven't changed their tune on how they deal with medical marijuana and have no plans to do so. They say they are focused on large-scale illegal distribution and sales operations, not the individual patient or the dealer on the street corner. While dispensaries seem to be a bit of a gray area, it seems that if federal officials in this state stick to 2009 guidelines set by the U.S. Attorney General's office, Colorado dispensaries that keep their noses clean should not attract the attention of federal prosecutors and drug enforcement officers. On April 19th, 2009, a letter referred to as the Ogden Memo, because it came from U.S. Deputy Attorney General David Ogden, has served as the law of the land when it comes to how the Obama administration intends to deal with medical marijuana in states where its use is authorized. The Ogden Memo lays out guidance for U.S. attorneys in states where medical marijuana is legal. In an environment of limited resources, the memo says, the Department of Justice is primarily concerned about significant traffickers of legal drugs, including marijuana, and the distribution of illegal drug manufacturing and trafficking networks. So it goes on to talk about it, but basically it's trying to justify what raids have been made, but some of them remains to be seen. I have to remind everybody that Safe Access Now, which is ASA, go to asa.org, is an excellent organization, and if you have been raided or know of a raid, to report it to ASA. They have a network going on where they can document these raids, and alcohol not only might be able to offer some help, but at the very least have a list of what's going on across the country. Medical marijuana is, we're still trying to live with our state's law the way it is, which means you cannot exchange medicine for any consideration, the way the law, which means you can't pay for it, trade for it, you can't trade anything of value for it. So in spite of that, we go on with our medical marijuana program. So if you out there are a patient and need a grower, or especially if you're a grower and looking at patients, please get a hold of me through the email address you see on the screen. I know of patients looking for growers right now, and it's a constant need. And also you can pick up the Just Say No flyer that I've put together. We have that at Voter Power every week, Monday through Friday. That's 5 to 7 Monday through Wednesday, 4 to 6 Thursday through Friday, with the Friday night potluck, and that's at 687 River Avenue. So will you scramble for that pin? I'll give the address again. That was 687 River Avenue, which is off of River Road. Remember, that's River Avenue. And so come on by and check out the facilities. We're there for patients, and I'm there 2-3 times a week at least. And there's a good area. There's an area there that patients can medicate, can network, and there slight donation, small donation. There's medicine available. The bulletin board to put up information. We got some great organizations that are listed in my pamphlet to say no. So again, if you need some more information, send me an email, and send me an email, and I can send you this brochure as a Word document. And that's all I've got for this session, but stay tuned and we'll be back, and we're always looking for guests. Get a hold of us and come on the show, and if nothing else, come on down and visit us and watch the show being done. We appreciate you being with us again. It's Eugene Cannabis TV, and until next time with more information, I'll be seeing you later.
Are you tired of following all the rules? Ready to let loose? Have a little fun? Sounds like you need to. Get high. And with Narcomex Incorporated, your direct-to-consumer drug trafficking solution, you can. Narcomex values your business. That's why we're your #1 supplier of drugs, and you're our #1 consumer. These billions can't be wrong. We work hard for your business and have killed not 1, not 2, but 3 Mexican police and 2 journalists just to keep you high with that very joint. Why, our commitment to keeping you supplied has killed over 17,000 people right next door. Traffickers, soldiers, journalists, prosecutors, you name it. We're that passionate about your business. We've even begun to destroy some of your favorite tropical beach destinations. Because if you smoke enough at home, you don't even need a beach. But don't legalize it or grow it at home. Let us do the work for you. Sure, consumers boycotted evil companies, but there's no need to boycott Narcomex Incorporated, your direct-to-consumer drug trafficking solution, also offering heroin, meth, and cocaine. Narcomex Incorporated. Live a little, and forget others won't.
The first thing was to try to form an advisory board. I realized that we needed some people who were doctors and lawyers and who had credibility that those of us who had founded it, we were unknowns. Nobody knew us. We didn't have any particular credibility. So I began to contact people like Lester Grinspoon at Harvard and Norman Zinberg at Harvard, and Ian Kaplan was a professor of law at Stanford. There were a number of early people who had written books or otherwise indicated their interest in legalizing marijuana. So I began to contact each of them and asking them if they would be comfortable serving on our advisory board. And of course, then we made up our letterhead and prominently listed our advisory board on the side. But the real thing that gave NORML an agenda, we didn't have to look for, it was in front of us. The National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse had been created in the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. And the only thing about it that was decent was a provision that former Congressman Ed Koch from New York managed to get included. He put in a provision in the Controlled Substances Act that established this National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse. And it was a commission of which 4 members were appointed from Congress, and 9 members were appointed by former President Richard Nixon. And Nixon had been out front about his hostility towards marijuana. He thought it was a killer drug that led to heroin, and he indicated to the commission, he didn't want the commission created, but he just didn't have a choice. And once it was established and the members were appointed, former Governor Raymond Schaefer from Pennsylvania was made the chairman, and Richard Nixon told him publicly, don't even think about coming back with a marijuana legalization recommendation. So we did not expect a lot from the commission. Their first hearings were being held in real early in the first few months of NORML's existence. I think in March of 71, I believe, may have been the first commission hearings. They were here in Washington, D.C. And they had mostly anti-marijuana zealots testifying, and I was there physically, and I listened to the testimony. It was just hideous. It was frightful to think that that was still being said. It was all of the old marijuana leads to heroin sort of stuff, reefer madness stuff. So what I would do is the commission would hold hearings for 2 or 3 days, and when they broke for lunch at those hearings, I managed with Ed Koch's support to get a room in the same building on Capitol Hill where we would hold a NORML press conference, and I would have people like Norman Zinberg and Andy Weil and Lester Grinspoon and other qualified PhDs and researchers who would immediately stand up in front of the same cameras that had been covering the Marijuana Commission hearing and say that simply is not accurate. That person is using misinformation that was put out by Harry Anslinger in the 1930s, and we should be moving beyond that. So that evening on the national news, it's true, they always covered the Marijuana Commission hearings, but once they covered their hearing, they would then switch over and they would cover the NORML press conference. What I underestimated, and later turned out to be a major positive development, is the marijuana commissioners themselves. Most of them were reasonable people who wanted to do an honest job. And they even established nights where they invited adult, mature marijuana smokers to come to private sessions where the marijuana smokers would smoke in front of the commissioners. The commissioners were generally people who had never seen anyone smoke marijuana. They didn't even know what it looked like. But they wanted to find out exactly what does marijuana do to you when you smoke. Well, after they held a few of these private hearings, obviously it turned their minds around. So at the end of that 2-year period, when they came back to make the recommendation to the President and to Congress, it's true, they did not recommend legalizing marijuana in the sense that there would be a legally regulated market. Nixon had indicated they shouldn't even consider that, and I think, frankly, they just thought politically it was too far to go. But what they did do was come back and suggest that we should stop arresting responsible marijuana smokers. And that's a concept that subsequently became known as decriminalization. It would still be a crime to sell marijuana. It would still be a crime, unfortunately, to grow marijuana, but at least the 90% of the arrests that were focused on simple marijuana smokers would no longer be a crime if these recommendations were enacted. Now, real quickly, let me just add that why that also became important was the Marijuana Commission went out of business at the end of those 2 years. They had no mechanism built into the law for them to try to implement their recommendations. So, NORML became the vehicle to do that. We then would take the experts, some of their own commissioners and some of the commission staff, but also Grinspoon and Zinberg and other people like that. We would use our funding from Playboy to fly them to any state legislature where we had a young member of the legislature willing to introduce a marijuana decriminalization bill, and we had lots of states, probably 30 different states where bills were introduced during the 70s. We would fly out a supporting group of 3 or 4 or 5 people to testify so that if the local police testified against it, at least we had an impressive array of witnesses testifying why it made sense. And so NORML's, most of our work during the 1970s was actually trying to implement the recommendations of the Marijuana Commission. So obviously the Commission had an enormous impact on our work.
You know, that's the thing about the legalization of medical marijuana and eventually of marijuana overall, is that it inspires new confidence in law enforcement. You know, there's a lot of us out here who've been marijuana consumers and we know the law is wrong, and we use it because it benefits us in several ways, for either one way or another. And so, you know, the police are the ones I've run into anyway recently in Portland have been very supportive of ending adult marijuana prohibition and encouraged our activity there. You know, we have this new initiative petition, the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act. It will regulate the sale of marijuana to adults through state licensed stores. They'll allow bars or coffee shops to get a license, and then don't allow minors to be present to sell and use cannabis on the facility. It'll allow adults to grow their own as well without a license or any sort of regulation. The sales will be through cannabis-only stores. So like Dennis mentioned a moment ago, a lot of us decided putting it in with liquor stores wasn't a good idea. And so it'll separate that market. I think a lot of more people will be using cannabis and fewer will be driven to drink, so to speak. And we'll see an enormous drop in accidents and alcohol-related violence and disease. I'm really looking forward to that. So for people who want to find out more about that, they can go to OCTA2012. That's OCTA2012.org. OCTA2012.org. And also you can get to it through our hemp.org portal. Just click on the link there. And so, you know, it will set 2% of the proceeds of the sale of marijuana to adults to promote hemp biodiesel fuel and hemp for fiber, paper, and building materials and all the other products that hemp could be promoted. So I think the main reason that marijuana is illegal today has nothing to do with drugs. That's really just a smokescreen. It's really about the continued centralization of economic and political control here in the United States. So we see it radically changing the economy in short order, especially with hemp biodiesel and hemp fiber for building and textiles. Will be stopping non-sustainable practices with deforestation, with hemp fiber for building materials and paper, and with global warming and pollution with hemp oil for energy and hemp biomass energy as well. So we won't need to be importing Middle Eastern oil when we can make it ourselves from agricultural products. The thing about hemp is the byproduct of making biodiesel and oil is food. For every 300 gallons of oil, it produces 3 tons of food. It's basically, for every 100 gallons, the byproduct is a ton of food. And you can get currently from feral hemp in the United States 300 gallons of oil and 3 tons of food per acre, plus 25 tons of fiber. So it's going to re-energize our economy and put money in the hands of farmers and take money out of the OPEC nations and the money we spend on petroleum production. So it'll revitalize our economy. It's really an issue of economic and political justice that's really at the heart of marijuana prohibition. But, you know, we're all distracted with the drug issue, and that's the whole point of the marijuana prohibition. You know, when it was instituted, it was based on anti-Hispanic racism. That's why we have this term marijuana instead of cannabis or hemp, which were the common terms for our favorite herb until then. So we're excited about the petition campaign. We just got our certified ballot title. We're about to kick off the drive. We actually have till July of 2012, about 16 months to gather those signatures, but we plan on turning them in sometime before the fall. And so we want to break the record for the earliest qualifying initiative in state history.
And marijuana truly is a luxury item, one that America can no longer afford.
Yeah, well, you know, the price will be a lot cheaper. I think if you could grow it in big fields, the price of good buds would come down to about $5 an ounce in production for the farmer.
Herb is a plant.